There are an estimated 9,700 bird species in the world. This is a pied wagtail about to eat some critically endangered mealworms, but today's conservationist works with waders, of which there are approximately 250 species, or 3% of the number of bird species in the world. The rarest wader is the black stilt. Rick Simpson and his wife Elis are bird conservationists and the joint founders of the wading bird conservation charity Wader Quest. Rick joins me today and talks about his work. I began by asking him to describe his connection to waders.
I grew up about as far away from the coast as you can get. So as a birder, I loved the birds in the garden, etc., etc. But to me, the birds that you would see at the coast were exotic and unattainable. I clearly remember on a YOC outing, we went to the local reservoir and I saw my first bar-tailed godwit. Actually, at that point, that got me into bird watching in the first place, getting on my mother's nerves. I was knee high to a redshank at the time. She said, "Look, settle down and do something quietly." Just so happened there was a book next to her on the table, and it happened to be a bird book, and it was my brother's. He shoved it across the table at me. He said, "Copy something from that." And I got to page 42, and there was a lapwing. And I went, "Wow, look at that!" So my first lapwings, and I was captivated by the sounds that they made, the fact that they ran in opposite directions. When something happened and they all went up together and they flew around together. And I was fascinated by this and those beautiful sounds that they made. And that was me. I was hooked. So lapwing is still my favorite bird. That was how I got into bird watching. And I think that idea of waders being exotic and so on has stuck with me. I can't really explain why, but it's just one of those things.
What prompted Wader Quest's creation?
When we were in Brazil, we were quite involved with conservation, with some of the young children, taking them to the forest, and they actually lived in the forest, some of these kids. For them, a green-headed tanager, if you got enough of them, made a nice pie. You know, that was their connection to nature. And we said, well, there is an alternative. Perhaps, preserving them might be a good idea because this forest is precious. And when we came back to the UK, we were kind of a bit lost for something to focus on. We didn't have a goal in life. We didn't have anything that was sort of our thing, except the fact that when we were still in Brazil, I had found out that the thing called a spoon-billed sandpiper was heading towards extinction. Now, back in the 1980s, the slender-billed curlew became extinct, and I had the opportunity to go and see them, but didn't go for various reasons. I wasn't able to go, and then it's still critically endangered officially, but pretty much thought to be extinct. So I didn't want that to happen again to another wader, particularly, and something with such a cute little spoon-shaped bill. I said, I have to see one of these. So when we came back to England, my focus was on arranging a trip to go and see spoon-billed sandpiper. And that meant learning as much as you can about the birds, and so it gives you the opportunity, the best chance of seeing one, maximizing your chances. One of the things we did was we attended a talk by a chap called Nigel Clark, who was with the BTO at the time, about the spoon-billed sandpiper. We went into that auditorium as people determined to get as much information about seeing them as possible, and came out as people saying, "This is awful. Surely there must be something we can do to help." And that was when the plan to raise money for the captive breeding program in Slimbridge came about. And the way we decided to do that was, in today's climate, people would say this was foolhardy, but we decided that we would travel the world to see as many waders as we could. In a year was the original plan. And hopefully people would think this was a good stunt and they would send us money, not to pay for us. We paid for that out of the proceeds from our house we sold in Brazil. But they would give us money, and we would then give that to Slimbridge, to the WWT for the spoonies. So that is how wader quest started. It started as literally a quest for waders, and that led us then to having a wider picture of wader conservation. We started raising money for the hooded plovers, sitting in a queue to get an Indian visa. I was sitting there and I said, do you know what? I really want to carry on with this. I think we should start a charity. And Elise turned to me and said, absolutely not. We finished the traveling. We carried on raising money. And in the end, Wader Quest evolved from that.
How did you become the founder of Wader Quest?
So I should point out, joint founder. Elise is every bit as engaged. It was this idea that we felt we wanted to continue doing something.
Where does your motivation come from?
I just want to champion them. I just want to be able to get up in the morning and say, what am I going to do for them today?
How did you come up with the name for the charity, Wader Quest?
That was the name of our fundraising effort.
Rick, when you're running Wader Quest, what is your biggest guilty pleasure?
There are things that when you're running a charity, and I want to emphasize, not only does Elise help me, we also have trustees that you are now happily one of, and we have an executive committee, so I don't run it entirely myself. There is always something I need to be doing, but I have a real fascination for the history of waderology, if you like, the nomenclature and all that sort of thing. So when I think no one's looking, I spend my time looking through books.
Rick, what is your best wader fact?
It's the long flight that the Bowery subspecies of Bartail godwit makes from Alaska all the way to New Zealand non-stop.
Where does your motivation come from?
I just want to champion them. I just want to be able to get up in the morning and say, what am I going to do for them today?
Wader Quest helps conservation projects internationally. How does that work, please?
We're interested in waders everywhere. Researchers in need of a bit of help with their funding, because we found a lot of them were saying that we need to find out about the Nordman's greenshank, for example, because we know very little about it. If we know very little about it, we can't really do much in terms of managing the environment for it. So we need to find out more. And we have also made donations to larger organizations. We bought an incubator for the curlews in the WWT. People needed an incubator, so we bought one of those, etc. So wherever we can help, if we feel that we're making a contribution, then we like to be involved. We just really want to focus on the idea of people and communities. That we have a grants panel, and there are 4 people on that grants panel, and those 4 people will look at each one and say, does this fit our remit? Does this raise awareness? Does it promote local involvement? And really that is our main goal.
Rick, you're obviously a passionate wader conservationist, both you and Elise. Which books or people or meetings have most influenced your thinking?
Funnily enough, my glamorous assistant has just been in, so I'm able to show you this, actually, which is quite interesting. That's the book this is the very book that got me into birding in the first place. There's the lapwing that as a child I looked at and said, wow, I want to see one of those. So obviously that one counts. This book has obviously been extremely influential. In '86, I think this came out, when I already had this interest in waders, and I discovered that there were so many, and many of which I really want to see one of those one day, and one of which was the spoon-billed sandpiper. So this book has been with me a long time, and again, you can see it's a working item. So I keep up with nomenclature and splits and lumps and so on. I do have a pristine one of those as well. And another book, this is an example of the sort of books that influenced me a lot. It's interesting because it's called North American Waders and has a spoon-billed sandpiper on the front, which is always been very rare in North America, but there you are. But this is a book about the history of it all, about a lot of it, of course, is to do with hunting and shooting and gunners and things. And although some of it's a bit of harrowing reading, it does give you an idea of how things have changed from those days to now, and how the pressures are very much different, and how our own thinking has changed. And that helps to focus your mind on, okay, this is what we know now. We didn't know that then, so we thought it was okay to go around shooting millions of Eskimo curlews every year. We thought that was okay because they'd always be there. We now know that's not the case, so we can apply that to today. And so there's a lot of information in old books like that which makes you think about the way that we behave towards wildlife today. And of course, if you want, I have already mentioned Nigel Clark, of course, that particular talk, hugely influential on me and Elis, because it really what started it all off.
How did you go about becoming a speaker, Rick?
A speaker? Oh, that was again. It was that same talk that we went to listen to Nigel. It was with the Bucks Bird Club, and I was talking to the chap who was organising the meetings there, and he said, "Yeah, we're always looking for speakers." I said, "Oh, I give talks," I said cheekily. He said, "Oh, right, I'll put you on my list." And I thought, "Oh, I better go and write a talk then." And that's really how it started. And eventually I put an advert in the yearbook, Birdwatchers yearbook.
Is there a standard text on waders?
Of course, we like to think that our website is a place to go to find out bits and pieces, but it is a work in process. But you know, it depends on what your interest is. If you're interested in, as a beginner, trying to find out how to identify a dunlin from a curlew sandpiper, there are lots of websites online. RSPB do them, BTO, Cornell do them. There are lots of websites with the basic information. For scientific stuff, if you're interested in science, you can contact the International Wader Study Group and get involved with them, as we did for a while. And hopefully our website will eventually grow to become a place where, if you want to know something about waders, WaderQuest is the place to go. We're not quite there yet, but we're definitely working on it.
Rick, what is the most endangered species of wader that you've worked with, and what are the threats to it?
Well, that we work with, I think, because we don't have a permanent sort of link to anything, we'll pay a project, etc. So probably the most endangered has to be the spoonbill sandpiper that we've actually been involved with. However, the rarest wader in the world is the black stilt, and we went and visited the captive breeding program for them. They were down to 23 or 27, I can't remember the exact number, of individuals in the world. And even now, after many years of rearing young and releasing them, there's still less than 200 individuals in the wild. So that to me, if you ignore those that are probably extinct, the Jordan's courser, Svenderbill curlew, Eskimo curlew, Javan lapwing, they're still critically endangered, but they're probably extinct. That black stilt is the rarest wader in the world. However, there has been a move recently where somebody has now said that button quails are part of the wader group. So I've had to sort of look at those, and I'm beginning to learn about button quails, and there's one or two of those which are really quite rare. So we haven't actually been involved with the black stilt in any sort of funding way, but that's certainly the rarest traditional wader, if you like. Nordman's greenshank is another one that we have been working with just recently. We helped some guys in Russia before all this stuff happened in Ukraine and so on. So I hope that will still be able to go ahead. So it generally is the rarer birds which get the highest press. But do bear in mind, we do like to help people just looking after their birds where they are, even if they're not particularly rare. They don't have to be near threatened or worse in order for us to be involved. They just have to be in need of protection.
Rick, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Anything I'd like to add? I always say that I would love it if people would take the time to look at these birds and just try and understand a little bit about them. Just watch a sandling on the beach as it runs beetling backwards and forwards with the waves, or the stately curlew as it probes, and then think to yourself, well, how is that sticking that what looks like just a lump of a twig or something into there? How is it finding food? And then you begin to understand that how fascinating are that their bills are not absolutely solid, that they have receptors at the end of them that can feel different pressures, which tells them if something is nearby or not. So they'll stitch and try and find this piece of this morsel of food. Think about the birds that fly for 12 days non-stop. And then you'll begin to realize that all of these really exciting things that are happening are all being threatened by the dreadful things that we are doing to this planet. And if there is any way that you can get involved, do so. If there isn't any way that you can get involved personally but still feel strongly about it, of course you can join Wader Quest. As a friend of Wader Quest, it's only the cheapest is £10 a year, and we guarantee that the money that you give us will stay with Wader Quest, because I'm not paid, Elis isn't paid, we don't pay anybody to do what they do for Wader Quest. All of that money will remain within Wader Quest, and all donations, 100% of all donations, ring-fenced, put in a special account and only used for Wader conservation funding.
Rick, you and your wife Elis are obviously very passionate and committed Wader conservationists. Thank you very much for being on the Practical Animals channel, Rick Simpson.
Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate the time and the opportunity.
If you enjoyed this video and found it informative about Wader conservation, please consider clicking like, sharing it with your mates, and subscribing to the channel. Next week, I talk with Rick Fox about butterfly conservation. See you then.